Thank you, sir. I just want to give you the key highlights of the report that Mr. Chidambaram has just released. That report will be shared with you immediately after the press conference. And we will also be sending you a soft copy of the report, of a Word version of the executive summary. Now, and I can also send you the highlights PPT if you wish. Anyway, I'm not going to repeat what he has already highlighted, but let's go ahead. So the key issue is what happened to growth. That is the title of our report this year. The unemployment crisis, Mr. Chidambaram has highlighted, and you can see that without repeating what he said, what we're going through is a phase of job destruction, job loss growth. Earlier, we used to be concerned about jobless growth. Now, this is what we're facing. Our parents of India invest so much in their children's education. However, today, graduates face an unemployment rate of 29%. The more educated you are, the less your chances of getting a job. And manufacturing jobs have declined. People are moving back to the farm where they're underemployed. And women are badly hit. Next. This is just illustrating the education and job situation. Next, please. Now, growth, the theme of our cover, basically, what you've seen over the last, ever since demonetization and GST, we've seen the economy slump. And this Modi slump, as you may want to call it, is now the new normal. This has become 6% or so as the average growth. At this rate, we are heading straight into what economists call the middle income trap. This means that the kind of opportunities that we were hoping to create, the demographic dividend that we are hoping to encash, all those are doomed. Essentially, we will be a stagnating middle income country, underproductive and uncompetitive globally. Per capita income has been growing at 4.52% since 2014, since Prime Minister Modi took over, and our per capita income is now below that of Bangladesh. 34% of Indians survive on less than 100 rupees per day, and income inequality is worse than it was under the British. Next, please. Yeah, this is just the detail. It's there in the report. The other real challenge, next, is that incomes are stagnating, people's and household savings are dropping, and their debt levels are increasing. Household savings are now at a 47-year low. Consumption growth is at a 20-year low, and household debt has soared to a record 39% of GDP. Basically, the families of India are in deep distress. Next. Manufacturing. The normal pattern of development is the move from farm to factory and then to services. India is experiencing a reversal of this particular pattern. And you all recall the Independence Day speech when Prime Minister Modi announced Make in India. And it's been a decade since that moment. And if you look at the targets, the target for Make in India was to increase manufacturing growth to 12 to 14% per annum. Since that period, it has averaged 5.8%. He wanted to increase the share of manufacturing in GDP to 25% by 2022. Last year, the share has remained stagnant at 15.8%. Number of jobs in manufacturing have come down by half between 2016 and 21. And he announced that he would create 100 million jobs in manufacturing by 2022. Instead, we've seen the workforce decline from 12.6% more than a decade ago to 11.4% last year. Next, massive corporate tax cut that was delivered to the private sector. They have not had the confidence in the leadership of the economy, in the guidance that the government gives, and has therefore chosen not to invest. Without investment by the private sector, there are no jobs being created, and economic slowdown is very, very apparent. In the last financial year, 23 to 24, new project announcements have fallen by 21%. Exports used to be more than 25% of GDP under the UPA, under Mr. Chidambaram. Today, they're below 20% of GDP, and our import dependence on China has surged by more than 83% since 2019-20. FDI has been falling. In 2023, it had come down to 0.8% of GDP. That means the world also is losing confidence in India's economic management. And 21,300 high net worth individuals have left the country between 2022 and 2025. These are people who otherwise should have been investing here. Next, what about the poor? Well, welfare schemes across the board are under attack. Mr. Chidambaram talked about the cuts in health, education, and other welfare programs. Well, you know what the impact is. Chronic malnutrition affects 38% of India's children even today. There have been budget cuts to the National Food Security Act, to the PM Matru-Vandana Yojana, to Mahatma Gandhi, Manrega, and health allocation is now less than 0.27% of GDP. Manrega is the unkindest cut. It is supposed to be a demand-driven program. It is the right of people to get 100 days worth of employment, but not even 45, 50 days are being provided. A lot of people are being axed from the payrolls, and again, a large number of people are being kept out because of the glitches in the Aadhaar-based payment system. If a lot of the budget allocation that you see for Manrega is being used for previous year payments and is not actually the amount that is going to those who are in distress. Next, farmers are hurting. You see this in the borders of Delhi. Agricultural growth, after a blip, has fallen to 1.4% in 23-24. The old story, MSP according to Swaminathan formula, which was promised, has never been delivered. The Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is benefiting the insurance industry and not our annadatas. And over 55% of farm families are in debt to the tune of nearly 1 lakh each. And more than 1 lakh farmers have committed suicide between 2014 and 23. Inflation is worsening. The cost, remember the thalinomics that one of our economic advisors had announced some years ago? Well, in the last year, the cost of a home-cooked thali has gone up by 10%, when wages and incomes are not going up. Excise duties on petrol and diesel. Over the last decade, they've increased by over 100% for petrol and 343% for diesel. This affects the entire economy and especially affects the poor who depend on these fuels for transport and for farm inputs, etc. And of course, the spectacular fall of the rupee over the last decade, and especially over the last year, from 58 per dollar in 2014 to more than 86 per dollar today. So this is going to make imports even more expensive at a time when there is so much global uncertainty. And finally, the last 3 sections of this report cover crony capitalism, the attack on various institutions, and NDA equals no data available. So as you know, the banks, the public sector banks especially, have written off nearly 10 lakh crores over the last 5 years. This is your money and my money that is being just waved off, and people who had borrowed are getting away scot-free. The Adani Group, the government's favorite group, their debt has gone up by more than 1.1 lakh crore, and the substantial investments in these companies is from our own Life Insurance Corporation of India and the State Bank of India. One of our former deputy governors of the Reserve Bank, Viral Acharya, he has published a report showing that 5 groups are monopolizing 40 major sectors of the economy. So what you're seeing is concentration rather than dispersion and competition within the economy. What else when we talk about the weakening of institutions, The RBI has been squeezed and forced to give huge dividends to the government. So also public sector banks, public sector undertakings, which could have used these resources for additional growth. Further, you know that agencies have been misused left and right in the great extortion racket called electoral bonds. And that information all of you have seen after the Supreme Court decision. And finally, inconvenient data is constantly suppressed. For example, in 2017-18, the periodic labor force survey showed that unemployment was at a 45-year high. And as is typical of this government, they rejected it, they called the data flawed, and basically anything that reeks of bad news, instead of treating those as warning signs, the government just hides that data, rejects that data. Basically, the emperor has no clothes. The economy is in deep distress.
Stay ahead with our cutting-edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.